I've had an interesting week. Not that I never have an interesting week. It seems like I make events out of anything. My family has a little joke that we make a game about everything. You know, turn everything into a game. And ever since my son was little, it was like roll up the socks and there's a garbage can. You got basketball. You know, anything. But I did have an interesting week this week, and you know, things come on you that are unexpected. I talked to my daughter already, asked her if I could share this because it may seem exploitive to tell the story for a purpose, but I'm not telling it so that I have a story to tell in the message. Hey, there's a good thing I can preach on. It's real life stuff, and it's pertinent to us learning how to experience a contemplative life, which is a lot about being quiet and paying attention, being still. And my daughter called me during the week and said, Dad, the weirdest thing happened. I said, what? She goes, she has 3 boys. Aiden is 9, Elijah is 5 or something, and the little one's 2, I think. And so the middle one started yelling, Mom, there's ants, there's ants. He was in the bathroom, and there was ants around the toilet. And she's like, oh, that's awful. And then my son-in-law says, you know, it's probably just a couple of ants. No, sure enough, there was ants going around the toilet. And so he goes, well, come out of there, we'll kill them, find out where it's coming from. And they used the other bathroom. The kids used the other bathroom, and then it happened there again the next morning. Really weird, you know? And I'm like, well, so what happened? She goes, well, I went to work the next day, and my boss I was telling my boss the story. My boss says, you might want to check. She goes, I've heard that sometimes when there's sugar in the urine, it'll draw ants. Has anybody heard that before? 2 people. I mean, the odds of her knowing someone that knew that is just stunning, right? Her boss. And so she checked into it, and then, you know, it's the one time WebMD doesn't scare the crap out of you unnecessarily, you know? It was more like, no, there seriously are all the symptoms. He was begging for water. He was constantly thirsty. He was really hungry, very thin, very hungry. There's all these symptoms were there. And she set up an appointment, took him to the doctor, and his blood sugar level was 400. And he's normal's 100. And so it's nearly symptom-free unless the ants would have been there. Okay, we talk every day about paying attention. We talk about how the transformation from looking for the supernatural, looking for the moment, God speak to me, you know, I'll follow. We want the supernatural thing. I saw a thing, just to get a little bit, just a second of comically political, but not anything else. A friend of mine put a post up that said, God, please tell us if we should impeach Trump. I don't know, blot out the sun this week or something like that. I thought that was really funny. Show us a sign. But we look for the supernatural. We look for those things in our life to, you know, then I'll believe. And what we end up doing is not understanding that God doesn't work in mysterious ways. He is a mysterious God that works in familiar ways. We just need to open our eyes. We need to open our eyes every day to the mystery that we call God. That we need to be open our eyes and see God not only in others and in nature and in eclipses and in sunsets or in sobriety, but we also need to see God in ants, in the smallest of things. Be aware and pay attention. So when we calm ourselves and we go through the contemplative life, we're causing ourselves to get out of ourselves that want the grandiose things in life, that don't speak to the true natures of life. You know, it starts to make more sense when you look at Scripture and you realize that Jesus' words, like, don't store up yourself treasures in heaven, but store up treasures that do not gather dust and moths. Those things that stick within your soul and in your heart, and you can't ever forget that He's the God of ants. That the most precious details of our life and breath itself calls into attention the existence and the presence of a divine love for us. That while I may have as my high power universe or energy or that aspect of it, because I'm experiencing that, why can't it also be compassion? Because it's mysterious that I even have the capacity to show any compassion. Where did that come from? Perhaps there is a mystery that shows compassion for me. And it's not just universe and energy, but that it is expressing itself in the universe and in energy and in little ants. Aiden's life has been changed from one day to the next. But the key word in there is life. A changed life versus no life at all. We're afraid of change. We're afraid of transformation. We're afraid because somebody has sold us a bill of goods in this faith and this religion that it was a transaction. That God felt so sorry for me that He had to let Himself die in order that I could live. Instead of understanding that death is the process, the trajectory of our living. And that's what sobriety is, and that's what resurrection is, and that's what recovery is that I once was lost, but now I'm found. I was dead, now I'm alive, but I'm still the same person walking on this earth with clothes and everything. It was just that one minute I was ashamed, and the next minute I am no longer ashamed. That's the miracle of the mystery that we call God. The mystery that we call God, that we can walk into a room thinking we came here because we didn't know what else to do. So there's this thing. And then all of a sudden, this guy Michael gets up and talks about something that maybe I might want to do. It's the mystery we call God in all things, from spectacular eclipses to the ants. Thank God for little boys that miss the toilet. Who would have ever thought we'd be grateful for that? If we were to stop and think right now and pay attention in our lives, regardless of whether we are in treatment or we're out of treatment or we're in sober living or we've never had a substance abuse addiction or an alcohol addiction, so we're jealous of those right now who do because they seem to fit in even more than I do now. And we were to stop, and that's what this is designed for, stop for a second and think of how God has revealed Himself in the smallest of things. In the words of Elliot, I couldn't see so good, but now I can see. Thank you all. That's community. To be able to like the guy in India, where they were starting a young life group in India, and my friend Marty Caldwell tells a story about how he took these businessmen, Christian businessmen over there, because we all know that, a businessman with a lot of money and then hold them to his Christianity and take their money, it works out really well. Because that's what they do well, and took them over there. And when they're sitting in a circle, they asked the guy from India, who was the one who was hosting them and starting the young life in a poverty-stricken area, and said, "Why don't you lead us in prayer?" And he bows his head, and you have a room full of Florsheim's, and he looks down, and he says, "God, thank you for my shoes. Thank you for my shoes." Paying attention to the God of both the spectacular and the simple will be the door opening to intimacy with God. That's where it is. I would love to tell you that it mostly happened in my charismatic days when I laid hands on people and saw things happen, but I think I made most of that stuff up because I wanted to see it so bad. I'm sorry. I believe it happens. Don't get me wrong. I've been a witness to things like, a healing. I saw a healing take place when I stopped believing in healings. It really screws with your theology. And He also didn't heal when I thought He should. That's the sovereignty of God. He's not calling us into a clap-on, clap-off relationship with God that when it's dark, I want light, and when it's light, I want dark. He's engaging us into a relationship that says, follow me. Not do for me. Not serve me? Follow me. Well, yeah, but where you go is kind of scary. He said, that's why you need me to go with you. Jesus is saying, where you go is kind of scary. You need me to go with you. Let's take a look at this story of the road to Emmaus. It says, behold, two of them were going that very day to a village named Emmaus. Now, this is right after the tomb was empty. Okay? So, in case you're new to this, the dude died, and rumor had it that he rose from the dead, and they went to the tomb, he was gone. Okay? And so now it says, behold, two of them, his followers, were going that very day to a village named Emmaus, which was about 7 miles from Jerusalem. And they were talking with each other about all these things that had taken place. While they were talking and discussing, Jesus himself approached and began traveling with them. But their eyes were prevented from recognizing him. All along the journey that Jesus had with his disciples, he is trying to teach them to see with their heart eyes, with their spiritual eyes. Okay? We focus on how he healed their eyes, and so we're like, we want all that are blind to heal. Okay? Elliot had a doctor. Okay? It happens in real life ways. It happens in real life ways, and that's God too. But what he was doing was trying to open the spiritual eyes of his followers so that they could see him even on their dark day, that they could see light. And if they didn't see light in that moment of their dark day, they would rely on the light that was previously revealed. Okay? Now, pay attention to that aspect of it. When you are in darkness, you don't create your own light. Okay, that's relapse. That's me taking over. That's me saying it's dark, and so I'm going to have to shine my light. Okay? Candles, matches, all of those, even butane lighters, they have an expiration date. The light of God has no expiration date. And not only that, but it shines within even though things seem dark. In darkness, you don't shout at the darkness and yell at it and go, curse the darkness. Darkness, knock it off. What do? You flip on the light that was already previously set up for you. You rely on the light that was previously revealed. Okay? So he is calling us into this journey of when we can see and when we can't see. And in this case, they were going to have to see this thing with their spiritual eyes, because they didn't recognize him. He starts walking with them. And it says, what are these words that you are exchanging with one another as you are walking? That's what Jesus asked them. What are you talking about? What are you talking about? And they stood still and looking sad. One of them, named Cleopas, answered and said to him, are you the only one visiting Jerusalem and unaware of the things which have happened here in these days? Don't you read the paper, dude? Haven't you been watching cable? There's some bad junk going on. Don't you understand? This was a huge event. How could he not be aware? And he said to them, what things? And they said to him, the things about Jesus the Nazarene, who was a prophet, mighty in deed and word in the sight of God and all the people, and how the chief priests and our rulers delivered him to the sentence of death and crucified him. And you cannot even understate the devastation that they must have felt. Don't we have a difficult time seeing through our own devastation? It would be hard to see ants. It would be hard to see hope. It would be hard to see the things that we need to see when we are covered in darkness and fear and isolation. And you know what? It's understandable. It's understandable. It takes a spiritual calmness to suddenly see something. But we were hoping that it was he who was going to redeem Israel. Indeed, besides all this, it is the third day since these things have happened, but also some women among us amazed us. When they were at the tomb early in the morning and did not find his body, they came, saying that they had also seen a vision of angels who said that he was alive. Some of those who were with us went to the tomb and found it just exactly as he was alive. Some of those who were with us went to the tomb and found it was just exactly as the women also had said, but him they did not see. And he said to them, O foolish men and slow of heart, do you believe in all that the prophets have spoken? Was it not necessary for the Christ to suffer these things and to enter into his glory? Then beginning with Moses and with all the prophets, he explained to them the things concerning himself and all the scriptures. He starts to explain and give the history and what a moment. What a moment. And you know what, you guys? They still don't know who he is. They still don't know who he is. I think this is, if you don't think Jesus had a sense of humor, I don't know, man. He pulled stuff like this a lot. Turn the water into wine and not tell the wedding planner that it was water from the pots over there. Let him figure it out on his own. You know, all the time opening the spiritual eyes. And then they approached the village where they were going. And he acted as though he was going further. Isn't that a funny line? He acted like he was moving on, just going ahead. But they urged him. They urged him to stay with them. That's what we have to do. God has every intention to stay with us, but he wants the longing of our soul to pay attention and urge him. Because it is God's power with our urging and our will. It's God's power and my willingness. Not because he's playing a game and he wants us to ask for it. It's because what he's saying is the open eyes, the open spiritual eyes, and the willing heart will absorb it better than a person who's doing it out of duty. It's a relationship. He said, follow me in Scripture 17 times. How many times did he say, worship me? 0. Because it's intimacy and relationship. We spend more time worshiping than we do following. Isn't that true? Because we want the soul to feel satisfied and energetic. You know, that's why I say that message that Michael just said about not staying in the greatest sleeping arrangements or whatever. Man, that's the message of the gospel. Come suffer with us. Because we're investing in long-term pleasure. Dying to ourselves and resurrecting while we're still physically alive. That's good news. So they urged him, and stay with us, they said, for it is getting toward evening and the day is now nearly over. So when he went in to stay with them, and when he had reclined at the table with them, to remember something, his last moments with the disciples, what did he do? He's sitting at the table and he's like, you're not going to understand what's going on right now. We're going to have a meal together. And they had some of this antiseptic stuff. It's amazing. Of all the local Middle Eastern bugs and stuff, you know. And he said, we have to share a meal together because every time, hi Charlotte, every time, I get distracted. Every time we have a meal together, after this, you better pick her, she'll get eaten. When you have a meal and you have to eat, sometimes 3, sometimes 9 times a day, every time you do it, remember this moment. What a smart thing to do. And the idea of us consuming this moment and never forgetting. And he says nothing divides us except for what joins us together, and that's the brokenness. And he says, my body's going to be broken for you. So that I can enter into your brokenness instead of you thinking you have to get it all together. You thought you had to get it all together? I'm coming in through the cracks in your life. The mistakes, the fears. I want to join with you in your brokenness instead of you trying to be perfect. And he broke the bread. And then he said to them in that moment, he broke the bread and he blessed it. He began giving it to them. And then their eyes were open and they recognized him. Isn't that cool? He breaks the bread and they're like, what? You're the dude! Their eyes were open and they recognized him. He vanished from their sight. And they said to one another, Were not our hearts burning within us while he was speaking to us on the road? While he was explaining to the scriptures? Didn't it seem like there was something more to this? Didn't it feel just like there was something there? You know what prevents us from believing that is that we want tangible evidence. Let it go. No more need for tangible evidence. And they got up for that very hour on the road while he was explaining the scriptures to us. And they got up that very hour and returned to Jerusalem and found gathered together the 11 and those who were with them, saying, "The Lord has really risen and has appeared to Simon." And they began to relate their experiences on the road and how he was recognized by them in the breaking of the bread. So we come together today to do it again. To join in the breaking of the bread as a symbol that is God with us, not just on the light, but in our darkness as well. And then he said we need something to drink too. This is my blood which has been poured for you. It looks like Safeway grape juice, but it's not. It's my blood. And he said, because we are blood brothers and blood sisters. You are my brothers and my sisters. You are my friends. And we are no longer apart. And every time you eat this bread and drink this cup, remember, I have suffered in every way that you could possibly suffer, but I have overcome the world. So what is your solution? To fashion your own freedom? No. Hide yourself in me, in my body, in my blood. And every time you eat this bread and drink from this cup, remember that you belong. They're like, well, I don't know if I have total trust in that. Okay, well, you got 20% trust? Yeah, okay, well, then you give me your 100% of your 20% trust, and I'll cover you on the other 80, and we'll walk together. Don't let anything stand in the way. Doubt, fear, confusion. Just get your body and walk. And you can come from both sides. Just right that way. This is not consecrated in any way so that it has to be acceptable to any person's denomination. This is our community meal. And we confess Christ in us.